Blender 5 has actually introduced something that grease pencil animators have been waiting for. That is, motion blur for grease pencil. And it is the first time Blender's 2D drawing tool gets a proper built-in motion blur effect. But how does it work, and how does it change 2D animation in Blender? Well, first of all, this means fast-moving grease pencil strokes will appear naturally smeared or blurred along their path of motion, much like what you would see in a real camera. I mean, your 2D animations can now have a more fluid and cinematic look when things move quickly, and this update is especially exciting for projects that mix 2D and 3D elements, as grease pencil animations can finally blend in with 3D motion blur for more cohesive and dynamic scenes. But how does it work? Well, it is pretty straightforward actually. To use grease pencil motion blur, you just need to toggle the motion blur option in the render settings, and the engine takes care of the rest. There is a new motion blur step setting that lets you control the quality of the blur, essentially how many subsamples of the frame are actually used to simulate the motion streak. Increasing the number of steps gives you a smoother and more pronounced blur effect, since Blender is actually blending more in between moments of your drawing, whereas lower steps keeps the blur more subtle. Or you can put it this way: the more steps you use, the more frames the software blends together, which makes the motion look softer and smoother, just like a real camera capturing a fast action scene. You see, before Blender 5, grease pencil strokes couldn't have true motion blur, not at all. So if you rendered a fast-moving grease pencil animation, it would still look sharp frame by frame, unlike Blender's 3D objects which could be motion blurred. So many artists resort to manually drawing smear frames or adding blur effects in post-production with a workaround, or maybe just using add-ons. And now, this motion blur support is built into the grease pencil, so you can get that professional-looking motion trail without any hacks or extra effort. And generally speaking, this makes Blender's 2D animation workflow kinda more robust, and honestly, this is bringing it closer to what you would expect from a full production tool. For long-time grease pencil users, this feels like a long-awaited gift that finally closes the gap between 2D and 3D animation in Blender. Now, if you're wondering about the performance, the new motion blur feature is designed to be as painless as possible. It is basically just a checkbox and a slider, as I said before, so there is no complex setup needed. Once enabled, the grease pencil motion blur is handled by Blender's rendering system, much like the motion blur for regular 3D objects. The good thing is that the default settings are pretty reasonable, and any render time cost is relatively minor considering the payoff, and you have full control to balance quality versus speed. If you need super smooth blur for a dynamic slow shot, you can raise the steps at the cost of a bit more render time, or if you are doing a quick preview, you can keep settings modest. Overall, I think the implementation is quite efficient, and most artists won't find the performance hit troublesome. Also, the quick motions that used to appear a bit choppy or abrupt can now have a smooth transition blur, which adds a sense of speed and fluidity to the action. And the best part, Blender does the heavy lifting for you by automatically blurring the strokes based on their movement. And there is one thing to keep in mind: you won't see the motion blur in the viewport while you are animating, nor in the compositing stage previews, because it only shows up in the final render for now. This means one thing: you might want to do an occasional quick render to check how the blur is holding up. It is a small extra step, but the payoff is huge. And there you have it, guys. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, please subscribe to this channel to receive more videos like this. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.